point in my
today's
mind.
podcast.
You never ever give up.
Right.
And there's always a way, right? In the military, you know this from your time in the 82nd, right? There's a will, there's a waiver.
The truth is, adding value will never go out of style.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for another Five Things podcast. I'm here with Pat Harrigan. Thanks for joining us today, Pat.
Brian, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Found out we're from California originally, both of us, and both prior military. And truth be told, I messed up the audio for about 15 minutes, so we're jumping right into some.
It was a good warm up, though.
Yeah, it was. It is early in the morning, so I'll give myself a little grace there. So tell us, you decided to go into the military, West Point. I love the story about how you were denied initially. You mind jumping into that again?
Yeah, I can do that. So I split time growing up between San Diego and a really small town in Wyoming. And so my brother had some pretty significant special needs that really could only be addressed outside of Wyoming, but family originally from Wyoming. Grandfather was county clerk in Sweetwater County there for about 40 years. And so most of my values and heritage comes out of that state. Good Western state, but yeah, went to West Point, felt called to go there, and that's kind of the honest answer. And when I applied, like, I felt very called and felt very assured that this was where I was gonna go. This is where I was supposed to be. So I didn't actually apply anywhere else, which really frustrated. Number one, my family's not a military family, so that frustrated them. And number two, they did not like, banking all on black, right?
Sure. All in.
All in. And they almost got their worst fears came true, because I got a rejection letter. And I said, this is not the way that this is supposed to be. So I took stock of it, and I ended up writing a 4-page letter to the Dean of Admissions and politely informing him why he had made a very serious mistake, and that I was supposed to be at West Point, and here's all the reasons why. And I got a phone call a few days later after sending that off, and I had a spot there. And so that was my roundabout story into West Point, which is pretty cool.
And that's a great story, and to me that shows the character of the type of guy you want going to West Point, in my mind.
You never, ever give up.
Right.
And there's always a way, right? In the military, you know this from your time in the 82nd, right? There's an old saying, where there's a will, there's a waiver.
Exactly.
You can always make something happen.
So after West Point, you go into the regular military. You're a leg for a little while, and then
Yep.
you work your way up, and then you start aiming high for Special Forces. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so coming out of in the Army, officers can't go into Special Forces directly like they can in the Navy or the Air Force. You have to be seasoned before you go into the Special Forces in the Army. And so I branched infantry, went to Ranger School, got stationed up in Alaska, and took a platoon to Afghanistan, and was selected to take over a small combat outpost, air access only combat outpost in Afghanistan. It was northeast of Kandahar, just a bit in the Arghandab Valley. Very nasty area, very mountainous, very rugged. I had nobody on top of me, for my boss was 70 miles away. And I had about 400 total people. And a little 23-year-old running around, new second lieutenant, had 40 Americans. The rest of them were, various flavors of Afghans. And we were all co-located together. We were all working together. And it was just such an incredible traditional Special Forces mission set. They just didn't have enough Special Forces to cover down on it. So they had some infantry units that kind of got stuck with the Special Forces mission. And I just absolutely loved it, because there was no, there was no written pathway. We were responsible for our own outcomes. We were responsible for our own processes. And as a young 23-year-old, having that kind of blank canvas, it was just an unbelievably formative and just an incredible experience for me. Puts hair on your chest really quick, I'll tell you that.
I can imagine that's some serious on-the-job training.
Yes.
So you probably learned a lot through that. What are one or two takeaways from the military? Obviously, a lot of takeaways, but what are a couple things that stick out the most for you?
Well, and real quick, so I hopped. I actually came back to the States and told my wife, "Hey, I want to do this Special Forces thing. Like, I just did it for a year. This is amazing.
Okay.
I want to go to the Special Forces." She said, "Absolutely not. You're not doing that. You're just gone for a year.
Right.
You're not signing up to be gone more and more and more." And I said, I really feel like this is where I need to go. And she relented. She let me do it. And that's how we ended up coming to North Carolina. So went through the Special Forces course and everything, took a team back to Afghanistan. And she was right, just popping back and forth, whether you're always gone in the Special Forces, whether you're training or deploying. And it was really, though, the experience of a lifetime.
And you're especially brave because she's pretty well armed as well.
Oh my gosh! So, yeah, I don't mess with my wife,
right?
Nor does anyone else.
Exactly. Takeaway from the military.
Yeah, I would say that we have an awful lot of generals who look more like politicians than they do military leaders, and that's a very serious problem. I think it was a very serious problem in Afghanistan. I think it continues to be a very serious problem today. And then I would say second takeaway is a lot of our political leaders are just cowards. They are not who needs to be in charge of holding accountable, and obviously there's no holding accountable of anybody right now going on in either direction. But they're not qualified to lead. They're not qualified to represent. They're not qualified to have oversight. And our executive politicians are making decisions for the wrong reasons. I saw it kill a lot of our guys over in Afghanistan, and we need a new generation of leadership that understands what's at stake. We need a lot more veterans up in Washington, D.C. We need a lot fewer attorneys, and that's got to happen very quickly.
You took the words out of my mouth. I would love to see a bunch of veterans and business people.
Yep.
In Washington.
That's right.
And nothing against attorneys, but we don't need this constant, this constant incompetence and ideology that seems to prevail versus just fundamentally doing the job of what government's supposed to do.
Yep. No, without a doubt. I mean, at some point you got to step back and you got to say, we've had the same slate of problems for 30 years and we have not solved them. So the definition of insanity is sending the same solutions to fight the same problems that we've been sending without achieving outcomes. And that is, the traditional solution is take somebody who's an attorney, make them a career politician through, local or state governance, and then allow them to climb the ladder to the point that they can, they're qualified to serve in Washington. And then they just go up there and be part of the swamp, just like everybody else. And we have got to break that chain. And with less than 20% of Congress who are military veterans right now, we are almost at a historic low for veteran participation in Congress. I mean, historically, this country has been at 50 to 70%. That's where we've been. And being at less than 20, it really shouldn't be that big of a surprise to people why the country is burning and the world is burning.
It shows.
It shows.
Yeah. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, we spoke a little bit about, was how not only do you not necessarily get a lot of support from your party, the Republican Party, you've actually got PACs, and maybe I'm misstating that, but you've actually got people working against you that are part of the Republican Party.
I wish it was PACs.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's super PACs.
Super PACs, okay.
They have an unlimited bank account,
okay.
And it is what you've said is true, right? I mean, my opponents and the super PAC behind them is spent over $500,000 in negative spend against me just in the last 4 weeks. And we've got another 4 weeks till the election. And what's happening across the country, you're seeing this with a lot of different veteran candidates,
Sure.
right? But hey, we're coming up and look, especially those of us that have hopped into business and become successful, right? My wife and I started our business in our double wide trailer out in Fayetteville, and now we've got 120,000 square foot manufacturing facility just out west of Hickory, 55 employees, all American, tons of robots, manufacturing. Like it's an amazing place.
That's awesome.
And the establishment is working overtime, spending hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to make candidates like me look like the establishment so that people vote for the establishment. And unfortunately, we're in a day and age where people just regurgitate headlines.
Sure.
They repeat things that they've heard without actually doing the investigation themselves to see if what is being alleged is actually real or whether it's manufactured and contrived. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with manufactured and contrived attacks that their intent is to fool people into voting for who they actually don't want
Right.
in office. And I'm talking from the perspective of the voters, but the voters don't know any better. We've lost wisdom and discernment and free thought in this country. We've lost that element of individual agency. And I think, you got to look back to our founding fathers, right? I mean, we've got a great document in the Constitution if we can keep it, right? And what it requires to keep it is a, traditional set of values and a very educated population that has the ability, that has wisdom, that has the ability to discern truth. And if we lose that, we end up with the wrong people in Washington. Hey, wake up. That's the situation right now.
Right.
And we need to fix that.
I'm real big on principles. And I know you're the same way, to where it doesn't matter to me if it's, say, Mitch McConnell or Joe Biden. If they're doing something right, then it's right. It doesn't matter which party it is to me. But what's interesting is it's become more apparent that you have what I call the machine. You've got the establishment. You've got this machine that's working to completely oppose anybody that's coming into, in my point of view, take some of their power away. The money grabs that they're doing. I mean, we're $34 trillion in debt. We were just talking about $2 trillion lost in Afghanistan, or spent in Afghanistan.
Sure.
To essentially just leave billions of weapons for the Taliban.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that it's establishment against people that are going to do the best they can for the citizens.
No, I think that's a very accurate perception of reality. And you have this kind of uniparty mentality, right? There's a lot of truth to that. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a very logical thinker.
Sure.
I've worked at the tip of the spear. I understand why conspiracy theories are there. Oftentimes they're not true, but I can see why people connect dots in the ways that they do. And so, I generally take a very deferential perspective to leadership. Our founding fathers called our citizenry to do that because you don't have the perspective, that they do from the top of the hill, right? It doesn't mean that you trust everything that they say. It does not mean that you do everything that they do. It does not mean that the decisions that they make are right. But I generally give deference until somebody proves otherwise. And I think it's become very clear to me, I think it's become very clear to a lot of people in this country, that people are making the decisions that they're making for very nefarious reasons.
Yeah.
And that is very concerning for the future of this country. It's one of the reasons I'm running, because I'm convinced that we are about to be the first generation of Americans that leaves less opportunity to the next generation of Americans. My kids, your kids, people who are listening, their kids, grandkids, whatever it may be. I look at those little eyes of my two little girls. They're 4 and 6, Reagan and McKinley. So you can tell I've been a lifelong Republican with those two names. And I see the hope that's in their eyes and the condition that we're setting for them across society, across this world, to see that hope fulfilled. I don't see that. I just don't. And I'm very concerned for their future. I absolutely love this country. I'm incredibly concerned for the future of this country. And if we don't get good, solid, principled leaders of character who we can trust to do the right thing, that aren't there for themselves, that aren't there to line their own pockets, make $174,000 a year, pop out 15 years later worth $30 million, right? If we don't get good folks up there, this country's in for a world of hurt.
I agree 100%. And so jumping right into some of the whys for you, you've talked a little bit about it. What are some of what are a few of the biggest priorities for you to address quickly once you're up there?
Yeah, I've kind of narrowed it down to 3 things, and just I keep it simple, right? The old military, keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS principle. And I think that the bulk of the problems that we have, and I'd say we have like 30 different very serious structural strategic problems that we need to solve, but that's just too much to kind of tackle all at one time. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So boil that down into kind of 3 categories. I think this country, we need to protect our nation. We need to unleash our economy, and we need to restore governmental integrity. I think those are the 3 main categories of lines of effort that we need to have. And truth be told, I don't think we need to solve all of these problems at one time, unless we found ourselves in a period of true crisis. And a lot of people say that we're in crisis right now. As a former special operator, I can tell you we are nowhere near the crisis that could be. And so to the extent that we're operating in the paradigm or the realm that we're operating in right now, I think that if we make even incremental progress along each three of those lines of effort, and we do that, maybe two or three 2-year blocks in a row, I think that this country is a much better place in 4 to 6 years than it is right now. And when you talk about protecting our nation, we're talking about immediately closing our southern border, right? We have to complete President Trump's wall. We have to reinstate his Remain in Mexico policy that was very effective. We have to get away from this concept that we're practicing right now of economic asylum. We do not owe anybody in the world economic asylum. And finally, we have to deport illegals who have broken our laws, right? And we've got to do that immediately. We also have rampant crime across most of our cities, most of our blue cities across this country, by the way. That is starting to spread and metastasize out into the countryside. That's affecting the integrity of our government, but it's also affecting the safety of our people. And from I'm in manufacturing. I see critical manufacturing leaving this country, and our ability or inability to produce directly impacts our ability to defend ourselves. Greatly affects our strategy of deterrence, and greatly affects whether we would be successful in a conflict. And I'm not a neocon. But I am someone that doesn't want to cede the decision to enter global conflict to our enemies. We have to maintain peace through strength. And to that extent, if we can't produce, we are weak. And so, that's a national security issue for me, just like energy surety is, right? People want to be energy independent. This term that gets thrown around, I hate that term. I want to be energy dominant. And we have to be energy dominant in this country if we're going to have a robust and vibrant economy, and if we're going to have a very resilient defense, not just in this country, but across the globe, and lead the way like we always have. We just need to be smarter about how we've done it, because we've done it completely wrong for the last 20 years.
Right. And, from my point of view, Trump had us, we were a net exporter under Trump, and we were ramping up production, but you're not a country if you don't have control of your own energy.
Nope.
And if we're too reliant upon China or Iran or the Middle East or these countries, and Europe's dependent upon Russia for their energy, why would we put ourselves in such a bad spot like that?
Right.
So to me, there's a lot of well-hearted, good-hearted people that think about the environment and things like that, and to me, they're being manipulated to weaken the United States.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to frame it, right? They're being manipulated, and the outcome is that it weakens the United States. I don't think that the majority of these folks truly understand the implications of their actions, decisions, and votes.
Right.
I really don't. I don't think there's some grand conspiracy here. I think they're just uninformed. And gets right back to, they do not have a military background. They do not understand why our adversaries, and in some cases why our friends, make certain decisions that they do. Look, our friends spy on us, right?
Sure.
I mean, most people don't realize that, but they do. And if you don't have the background or requisite experience to look at every situation through that lens, then how are you going to make the best decisions for the United States government and the American people? You're not. You're going to get manipulated. And so, I tend to kind of stay away from the conspiracy theories. I just think that people are making poor, uninformed decisions.
Right. And so so your three main things, did we touch on
protect our nation,
right?
Unleash our economy. That's the second one.
Right.
The third one is restore governmental integrity. So unleashing our economy, as you might imagine, I'm a huge fan of small business.
Sure.
I mean, that's the driver that has allowed my wife and I to go from a double-wide trailer in the middle of the woods to that 120,000 square foot facility that we have right now.
And provide good jobs for people.
Providing great jobs for people along the way. And we've nurtured a number of those folks underneath us. They now have their own businesses too, right? Like, we gave them kind of the initial rocket fuel to go, create their own adventure. Sure. and create their own outcomes. And that's the beauty of our system. And that system must be preserved if we're to have what we've always had, which is, number one, a very strong and robust middle class, but number two is social mobility. And that social mobility thing is really, really important to me. I think that the Democratic Party has transitioned away from being the party of the common man,
Right.
and Republicans have not fully adopted the mantle of the middle class yet. And we need to do that because the economy is running away from the middle class.
Right.
And it's a real problem. I mean, we have Wall Street is just kicking it out of the, hitting the ball out of the park right now. Main Street is not. And it is really tough
Sure.
making ends meet across the country in a lot of different sectors and in many, many, many different states. And our government is not being responsive to that because, quite frankly, Democrats don't care, right? I mean, the 47 out of the top 56 wealthiest counties in this country are Democratic controlled. That tells you everything you need to know at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And if you look back, and I ran some numbers several months ago, this got posted on our social. I don't do social media. Somebody, I give my team the information, and they post it. I think social media is toxic, but
A little busy.
yeah, a little busy too. But I did some number crunching, and in 1934, the average household income was a little less than $90,000 equivalent in today's dollars. And today, the average household income is less than $80,000. And the difference between 1934 and today is we have about 50% more dual income households in the United States in 2024 than we did in 1934. And so when people look out at the economy and they say, man, I'm struggling. Like I feel like I'm not keeping up. I feel like there's not a place for me, right? Mm-hmm. And you boil down to this feeling like, I feel like I'm working twice as hard for half as much.
Right.
You are.
You are, yeah.
And that, like, Republicans have to seize on this, and we have to put the principles in place to unleash our economy. That starts with small business, that starts with opportunities at a very low level, and it finishes with government not picking winners and losers in our economy. We have got to stop picking winners and losers. We have to allow people to go create their own success stories.
Sure.
So critically important.
It all starts with the business owner. That's where tax dollars come from. That's where government jobs come from. It all starts with the business owner producing a product.
Yep.
And really boiling it down to a salesperson. You know,
Yeah.
the salesperson's driving that revenue.
Yep.
So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for squeezing this in. Thank you for repeating some of this, the first part of it.
Yeah.
I know you've got to get back to the Charlotte area for a luncheon.
Yep.
And I would love to have about 3 more hours of this, but I appreciate the time we got today.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, Brian. It was a really great conversation. Thanks for your insights.
Awesome.
And,
So
we'll connect later.
people can find you, Pat Harrigan for Congress online.
Yeah, HarriganforCongress.com. Harrigan spells Harrigan like the old Yankee Doodle Dandy jingle.
There you
And if anybody wants to volunteer, you can hit the volunteer tab. If anyone wants to contribute, they can hit the donate tab.
Get involved, folks. Put your money where your mouth is. Don't just complain about it. Do something, even if it's $10. That makes a big difference for a congressional seat.
Oh, chipping in. I mean, we're in an incredibly expensive media market. We just dropped $300,000 2 days ago on media. We're going to try to do that again between now and the election. It's only 4 weeks away, so every little bit counts. And truly appreciate everybody listening in today.
Thanks for stopping in, Pat. And I'd wish you good luck, but I know you don't need it. So thanks for joining us.
Prayers. Everybody's prayers.
Prayers help
Yep,
for sure.
They do.
Thanks for joining us for another 5 Things podcast.